Good morning, everyone. We are beginning yet another webinar as part of our MSc Development Practice program. We have been doing a couple of webinars as part of our MSc Development Practice program from the Ideas Office at General Global University. And this program is scheduled to begin in August this year. And through these webinars, we have been trying to cover a couple of different facets of our everyday development discourses. And today we have with us Professor Guya, who I'm very personally and professionally excited to welcome to this talk. And Guya is an old friend, and more than that, like I'm really looking forward to his future scholarship as well. Professor Puya is an assistant professor of sociology at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Roorkee. Previously, he held fellow positions at CSTS, New Delhi, Harvard University, United States, and the IIT Guwahati. His research interest pertains to the issues concerning tribes development and borderland studies. And in today's talk, it's primarily about how dispossession due to construction of power in Manipur of the Northeast India unleashes effects of accumulation. And very keen to listen to what you have to talk today, Priya. Over to you, and a very warm
welcome. Thank you, Gayatri. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, perfect.
I'm grateful to the organizer, of course. To Gayatri is not just just another colleague, definitely in different institution, but also a very close friend. And we have known and seen each other since our MA days, and it's wonderful to get acquainted with each other again. After some years of disconnection, because we have lost each other contact and connections, but then academia has reunited us again in different ways and in different times. So I'm very grateful to OP's Inter Global University also, and I'm very excited and glad to be part of this very important webinar series that specifically tries to look at the different aspects of development. So the title of my today's presentation is Who Accumulates Capital, Community, and the Politics of Dispossession in Northeast India. So I'm going to specifically speak from some of the work that I have been doing in the context of Manipur. And I'm a bad, I don't have a PPT because I'm very bad in, making a point in a PowerPoint. So I will fall back, on the old traditional style of presentation, which is I'm going to read out my presentation in the hope that there will be more clarity in terms of, laying out the kind of arguments and also, the vantage point that I'm coming from. So to start with, I'm going to start with my abstract, and then I have 4 parts in my presentation. One is the first part will be mostly about laying out the arguments and the ideas behind this presentation. And in the second section, I will specifically look at some of the frameworks that I have applied, and then I will come down to the context of Khugadam in Manipur. And the final part will be more or less looking at the question of what I call who accumulates. So really trying to address the core of the paper. So in India, generally narratives of dispossession due to development projects and elsewhere have focused on displacement, loss, and life deprivation of rights and their ecological impacts. Research on the subject has widely adopted and used the framework of accumulation by dispossession, particularly with the neoliberalization of India's economy. In most cases, marginalized populations such as tribes, among others, are viewed as victims of development. In this presentation, I will show that how the construction of Khugadam in Manipur has witnessed multiple transformations, with the continuing refashioning and reinvention of the dam site into tourist spots with booming resorts, whereas the vast majority of the dispossessed continue to witness deprivation in the face of increasing privatization of lands. So, to put it in a nutshell, what I'm trying to essentially say is that this work tried to depart from viewing a community in a very homogeneous and differentiated terms, particularly when it comes to tribes. So the construction of Khugadam in Manipur resulted into accumulation from within And this is the accumulation from within is essentially, what the title of my paper or my presentation also intends to address. Now, the first part, to go to the first part, the first section of my presentation, young people driving towards Khoga Dam, or locally referred to as Mata Dam in Manipur, due to the location of the dam in Mata village, on Sunday have become a common affair in Churachandpur district, Manipur. Over the last few years, as the construction of the dam has taken off, it soon emerged as a site that attracts locals from nearby towns and villages to visit the site. Located 6 kilometers from the nearby town Lamka, the dam site has emerged as a new site of attraction with the mushrooming of resorts, with families, visitors from other parts of the state, or even local communities visiting and viewing the scenic beauty of the dam, its surrounding hills and waters. Initially, I found it rather strange that people were attracted to view the dam. Except for the large concrete structure, there is not much to view or see. And given the dusty roads connecting the dam, local people, young and old, continue to visit. On the flip side, since the early years of independent India, dams or hydropower projects epitomize the future of India, a developed India, and no doubt it was central to the imagination of post-colonial state development. The case of Khoga Dam animates what the political anthropologist James Scott refers to as high modernist schemes, which are conceived as a strong version of the beliefs in scientific and technical progress that were associated with industrialization in Western Europe and in North America from roughly 1830 until World War I. They are high due to their gigantic or at times promise in which they are envisaged. Such schemes, whether they are scientific forestry, rural resettlement, or city planning, are engineering marvels symbolizing a nation's achievement and promise. As locals in and around Khoga Dam go and visit the dam, it is the hydropower dreams that attract visitors who go and visit the dam site to see and witness the construction of a dam, its structure and size, or in short, human ingenuity to tame, control, and accomplish wonder. Since independence, the construction of dams has evoked much opposition and contestation, primarily due to the displacement and ecological damage it caused. Term development-induced displacement, studies on dam and development in post-independent India have focused on the consequences of hydropower projects on the local communities. The contestations around the construction of hydropower projects, therefore, are alluded to the cause and ecological damage, but also on the question of its impact. As such, accumulation by dispossession, hereafter ABD, has been widely used as a framework to explain the process of dispossession, particularly in a context where the process of capitalist expansion integrates and destroys non-capitalist regions and societies. What makes ABD compelling, as David Harvey posits, is how accumulation recurs periodically over a period of time. In the post-neoliberal context, scholars have particularly emphasized how India's capitalist growth hinged on a continued appropriation of natural resources and their commodification. ABD, therefore, is particularly helpful in explaining and understanding how new subjects and reasons are integrated into the circuit of capitalism, either through economic or violent means. Now, if you look at the post-colonial development trajectory in India, you will also see that India's Northeast has been rarely in the conversation. But from the 1991 onwards, what we see is that there has been opening up of northeastern India, and today more or less anthropologists in particular have used this idea of the Northeast as a new resource frontier, essentially because the resources in the regions are being gradually opened up for private capital investment. In this chapter, while I find that such scholarships remain relevant to understanding the complex dynamics of development in India, I will show how the construction of Khoga Dam endangers a politics of accumulation beyond state or private capital. I reframe the argument of ABD by examining those dispossessed by capital and shifting my attention to the politics of accumulation. As such, my attempt is to foreground a narrative that will shed light on the problems of accumulation by going beyond the state and corporates, domestic or foreign. With a large Churachandpur district being a large tribal population and a complex landholding system with varying social structure, it also invites us to think about viewing accumulation beyond state and capital. For instance, the availability of land or land acquisition becomes an important aspect of any infrastructural plans. In the post-neoliberal order, the state itself, as the anthropologist Michael Levin argues, is a land broker state, which means that the state taking as one of its chief responsibilities the forcible transfer of agrarian land to capital for industrial, commercial, and residential development. In states or regions such as Manipur Hill District, the land market is different as much of the land remains outside of the purview, outside of the state purview, and are informally regulated through customary norms, in this case, either owned collectively by the community or by the chiefs, as in the case of the Kuki, Zomi, and other tribal communities. In this light, compensation for land compensation for land loss to land markets is being controlled by local elites who profit from the rising land prices. And furthermore, with the dam site being refashioned into new tourist sites, I show how this is leading to land concentration among tribal elites, or what I call tribal landlordism, paving the way for more accumulation while dispossessing the majority. So that is going to be the crux of my argument. So as I go along, now I'm going to the second part of my presentation, which is I'm going to dwell a little bit on the theoretical inspiration behind my paper. So, and I'm cutting short many aspects which I have written. Although the building of dams has occupied a key place in the literature on development, very few works have examined how it is linked to the process of accumulation. The development debate has mostly engaged with the question of displacement, the issue of resettlement, or the movements against dam construction. In the case of the Northeast, including Manipur, the bulk of the literature has been focused on the impact and consequence of hydropower projects, which at times presents a very simplistic view of the hydropower politics in Northeast India. Several scholars in recent times have shed light on the complexities and conflicting entanglements associated with dam construction, such as Duncan McDurry's work on the pro-dam actors among Lepcha communities in Sikkim, where he specifically emphasized how intra-ethnic relationships are crucial to understanding state-minority relations. Along similar line, Dukpa, in their work on hydropower politics in Sikkim, teased out the deeply political and often unpredictable and contradictory world of dam construction and its contestation, where groups and communities made unexpected switches in positions from opposition to being pro-dam in relation to hydropower development. So basically, the issue here is that not every local communities, whether they are tribes or non-tribes, are automatically against the construction of dams. As the work of Duncan and Dukpa have demonstrated, there are several pro-dam actors, even in states like Sikkim, which have seen a surge of hydropower construction in the last 20 years. Alf Gulven Nielsen's work on Sardar Sarovar project is worthy of mention here, where he uses the concept of ABD, that is accumulation by dispossession, and examine how the construction of the dam has paved the way for what he calls distributional bias. The idea of distributional bias in particular exposes how the construction of the dam resulted in a dual transformation, where on the one hand, property rights in water and electricity, as well as profitable investment opportunities, are concentrated in the hands of regional, national, and global property elites, while on the other hand, the displacement of peasant producers from their land without adequate resettlement and rehabilitation generates pressures towards proletarianization. In Gujarat, this implies that there was a transfer and concentration of productive resources into the hands of the dominant property class while dispossessing the subaltern groups such as Adivasis. The greatest support, according to Nielsen, the greatest support for the construction of the dam has also come from the same class, creating an alliance among pro-dam groups between farmers, industrialists, and politicians. So, essentially, what I seek to do in this presentation is to highlight this very differential experience of accumulation in this position through the case of Khugadam in Manipur. So, I'm coming to the third section, which I call Khuga Multipurpose Project, the dam that failed. Khuga River in Churchandpur district flows through the district. Local communities refer to it as Tuitha or Tuithapui, meaning river, and it has been a source of water for irrigation for agricultural fields, as well as domestic use such as washing and bathing, among others. The river passes through villages such as Renkai, Saikot, Zenhanglamka, and Zoveng. And personally, it is in this very river that I have learned swimming, when I was a child, when I was, someone growing up in the town. Today, one finds how the river acted as an important source during dry seasons, where men and women would flock to the river to bath, wash, or even fetch water by digging the river banks. Over time, the river stopped flowing and we no longer see people going to swim or wash. And today, the river remains polluted. The construction of Kuga Dam has changed the course of the river, and most importantly, water ceased to flow except in peak monsoons where it tends to overflow. Today, it is a dead river. By and large, Churchandpur is a very multi-ethnic district with a total population of about 22,74,000. The district is one of the tribal-dominated hill districts of Manipur. More generally, the local communities identify themselves within a broader category of Zhou, but there is internal diversity as well as fluid attachment across tribes. Churchandpur district economically is largely an agrarian society where the vast majority of the local population are dependent on land. Both zooming and settle cultivation are practiced, and settle cultivation is more common in the plain areas of the town and its adjoining areas. Needless to say, the dam is one of the few infrastructure projects that was constructed in the district, and as such, the promise of the dam to irrigate the field and act as an important source of drinking water, both for domestic use and agriculture, was highly anticipated. Today, the structure of the dam is completed, and canals and water pipes for drinking water are being laid. However, much of the project's objectives remains under-realized, and far from this, there is no real effort to achieve the same. The dam only acted as a reservoir, and in recent times, new resorts have sprung up in this place, making it almost like a tourist spot. However, its impact is far from over for the people who are affected and displaced. As many have noted, compensation for their losses in terms of land and livelihood cannot account for the social and community bonds, most importantly, their security and sense of safety. Today, many displaced families find themselves in a position where they cannot have a settled life. On the contrary, in the towns, in Lamka town, one finds how the construction of the dam has resulted in massive wealth accumulation for individuals associated with the construction. As the villager laments, canals are transformed into houses in the town. Now I'm coming to the empirical part of my paper. That is the type that I put it as submergence, narrating loss and dispossession. In engineering terms, submergence is used to refer to land that is flooded and submerged underwater with the construction of the dam. Therefore, the dam submergence area is estimated to be more than 250 hectares, including homestead land, agricultural land, and forest land. This understanding of submergence only accounts for the scale and geography in terms of the size, depth, and height. Even as one walks around the dam, one can see that the submerged area is very vast and the size is unfathomable for one unfamiliar with the old settlements and villages. Today, the water in submerged the national highway scale. A notable impact in the village around life. And any settlement in the village requires their consent, so is the use of land. Till the construction of the dam, villagers own land privately or if not depend on the common lands and practice zooming. It is also common practice among villagers to have a small huan, that is kitchen garden, in the surrounding area within their homes, which families rely on for everyday consumption or even at times sold to the market. Women in particular are engaged in making huan, that is the kitchen garden, who then subsequently take them to the market for sale. Many of the villagers whom I have met and interviewed narrated how the compensation for their loss, whether it be of their homes or their field, was meager, ranging from rupees 20,000 to 50,000. Immediately after they were relocated, there was no time or plan to resettle them. Many of them lived in 10 houses, while some families refused the compensation money. Most of all, since much of the land was owned by the chiefs and lands were owned informally without state records, many were unable to receive fair compensation for their loss. Even as they make subsistence income out of their huan, that is their kitchen garden and field, families more or less feel they were able to sustain themselves before the construction of the dam. Now I'm coming to the core part of my paper, which is the accumulation part. I titled it as land, alienation, and accumulation. So I have two parts within this. The first part is alienation, and the second part is accumulation. To begin with the alienation part, we sat at one of the resorts, which is highly visited by locals. That is, resort means some spots or some resorts essentially have several things like hotels. They have coffee shops, or different things, playgrounds for kids, they have futsal grounds, so on and so forth. So we sat at one of the resorts, which is highly visited by locals and non-locals, to view the size and scale of the dam water and the submerged village. My companion pointed towards the other side of the dam and said that all the lands are now owned by the local politicians and business owners who mostly hail from Lamka. When asked about the resort that we visited, the owner made a huge investment after purchasing the land for more than 30 lakhs. For any observer, the dam site has emerged as a new site of private investment with the mushrooming of resorts and owners, the majority of whom are from Lamka. Some of these resorts are equipped with children's playground, futsal grounds, shops, and hotels, and they now attract visitors from the town and the varied districts of the state. Of interest here is the story of the transformation of the dam site, but more so about how this transformation is significantly tied to land. In Marx's usage of accumulation, he explained how it is the historical process of divorcing the producer from the means of production. Hence, when lands are acquired, it implies that those who are dependent are being displaced and removed from the production systems. Therefore, even at the larger level, for example, at the national level, India's land conflict or land conflict in general is a conflict between those who own the land and those eyeing for accumulation. Land acquisition for the construction of Khurga Dam resulted in a significant loss of land. In a field site, one of the field villages that we visit, that is Lamzang village, the villagers practices two types of agriculture. One is settled paddy agriculture on the river bank, whereas the other households who do not have paddy fields practice jhum cultivation, which is mostly on the eastern side of the river. Locals in the village narrated how the produce from their fields were enough for their yearly sustenance. This was evident in informal conversations on economic life prior to the construction of the dam. In Gelzang village, for instance, I was told, before the construction of the dam, there was enough agricultural land. Paddy fields were sufficient for those who own the land and for those who practice jhum. Further to this, a villager narrates, Gelzang village has a very good paddy field. We can sustain from the paddy for a yearly consumption of rice. After the harvest, we used to have lomzu. The practice of lom actually is very common, where groups are formed, either large or small, among farmers and households, where they support each other in terms of clearing lands, sowing the seeds, and in times of harvesting. The harvesting period is also one of the most awaited, where villagers feast together to celebrate and reap 1 year of labor while sharing their produce with those who came to help and support them. The process of acquiring land for the dam was hastened when the construction of the dam resumed in the early 2000s. Villages in and around the areas, that is namely Gelzang, Lamzang, Moipai, Matamualtam, Lamzang, among others, were the worst affected. In Gelzang and Lamzang today, most families are now landless, and this landlessness also means that many of them have moved out of agriculture and are engaged in new occupations. With land belonging to the chief, communal land or the size of the chief's land in the new village site is no longer sufficient to continue with jhum land. This is aided by the commodification of land as lands become valued commodities for sale in the context of new infrastructural projects that are now underway in the Northeast. I'm cutting it short extensively so that we have some time for discussion. The final part of my presentation is titled Accumulation. I often move around when I visit the dam sites. The villages are now cut through by the National Highway 102B, known as the Guite Road, which passes through them. Even as one moves around the new village site, which has been relocated to a higher elevation, no real agricultural fields can be seen anymore. Perhaps the loss of land at the dam can be attributed to it. But beyond this, a new phenomenon is emerging, that is the concentration of land among a few private individuals. Even though no land laws in the form of private land ownership or what is often termed modern laws are applied in the whole of the hill district in Manipur, land transfer is not entirely curtailed. With no land ceiling rules, individuals purchase vast amounts and more infrastructure projects are making their way into the state. Elite capture of such lands has also increased significantly with the hope of lucrative returns from land-based compensation. The privatization of land holdings, coupled with the loss of land, has significantly altered socioeconomic relations, particularly on questions of access to resources. Access, as Ribot and Palisho, two noted anthropologists, argue, is the ability to derive benefits from things and the right to benefit from things. Therefore, access in this understanding is more akin to what they call a bundle of power, defined by the ability to benefit from things, including material objects, persons, institutions, and symbols. This understanding of the issue of access cannot be diverse from explaining who actually benefits from things and through what process they are able to do so. One of the most visible impact is One of the most notable impacts is visible in the loss of land or the unavailability of land for cultivation. A villager in Gyeongsang told me that the area for paddy cultivation is decreasing due to the increase in private ownership in the Gyeongsang village territory. Another respondent concurred while explaining the challenges. It is partly due to the selling of land, also due to increases in population and households within the village that land becomes scarce. On top of this, the chief prohibits some area of land for the general community for livelihood activities, which has further made things difficult. As he goes on, there are a lot of farms now in our village area, and most of the farms belong to people from Lamka town, with a very few from local as well. Therefore, a new form of land enclosure is taking root, and large tracts of land are being purchased for farms. For a long time, much of the chief's land was available for use with the permission of the chief. Needless to say, today access to land is being gradually curtailed, which is also hastened by the process of increasing of privatization of land. In today's time, the Koga Dam has the dam site has been refashioned significantly with the mushrooming of farms and resorts in the vicinity of the dam. Notable resorts include Green Hills, Gyeongsang, and Last Resort, which are privately owned and have huge investment to attract visitors. Entry fees to this resort are minimal to a mere rupees 20 to 30 per head, but visitors are offered numerous possibilities of leisure and attractions such as resort rooms and huts, boat rides, and playgrounds for children, among others. Many villagers sought employment in such sites as security guards or helpers to run and manage the everyday functioning of the resort. Others are engaged in fishing, a part of livelihood adaptation that villagers followed with the dam construction. Resorts, farms, and other commercial activities provide a new source of accumulation for the local elites across varying backgrounds. Politicians and business owners, for instance, to redevelop the land and transform it as a source of income. This transformation also needs to be located within the growth, if not urbanization, of Lamka town and the accelerated process of change that the town witnessed in the last decade. Lamka, as it is locally known, is the second largest town in Manipur and one of the fastest growing towns in the state. One of the most visible transformation is the rising land prices, if not how land has emerged as one of the most profitable commodities. As one plot house, mostly calculated as 13 to 40 feet, today in the town goes in the range between 15 to 40 lakhs, depending on the location, and in villages such as Mata or Gyeongsang, they now begin to range from 2 to 4 lakhs. Lands today are sold and resold, and agricultural lands are being converted into private farms or building homes. In this process, what one finds is that there is a dual process of alienation and accumulation, whereby accumulation is preceded by alienation, but the effect of alienation continues to be felt even today as more and more lands are being usurped for private use. To conclude, as the neoliberal economy expands, the Northeast region has now more or less been economically integrated, and it is fast emerging as the new resource frontier. As such, property relations are being altered across the region to enable this resource tapping either of land, water, minerals, or forests. Also, the increasing growth of towns and cities further contributed to this, where land has emerged as one of the most valued commodities. From once being owned and shared resources, lands across the region are now increasingly turned into private properties. The case of Lamka town in Churchanpur district in Manipur witnessed a similar transformation as more and more villages are being integrated into the town and there is significant change in land use. For local villagers, such as in Gyeongsang and Lamjang, this story of transformation is defined by continual dispossession, and today, a process that began with the construction of Kogadam. However, the story of this transformation is incomplete without narrating how there are sections within the communities that have usurped vast tracts of land for private and commercial purposes, leading to what I call accumulation by possession. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Huya, and thank you so much. It was like a fantastic paper, and all the more when you first told me I don't have a PPT, I joked you are old school, but having a good paper and reading out also works. That's what it shows. And thank you so much. And now I request the participants if you have any questions to raise your hand or directly ask questions, and attendees also I can. Uh, Activate the allow to talk option and yeah. So before other questions come in, so that there are 2 minutes, let me just take the liberty of asking my most pressing question. So here, lat elite is not anything new, it's always existed when it came to on questions of hydropower projects and like land acquisition, etc. So do you also is there also an argument that then customary land ownership uh, comes into the picture? uh, there is the accumulation is more aggravated. Is that the case also? Rather than fragmented on land ownership, people getting compensations for their small pieces of land. But when there is a head with a larger control of land or with the person, this sort of a transition creates a more aggravated land elite. Is that also an argument, or it's just I'm reading too much into it?
Gayatri, can you just come back where you mentioned the customary?
Is there an argument which you're making which also says if the land ownership, the customary land rights ownership patterns, if there is a process, rather than when it's not fragmented land ownership, are you also making a case that there is an aggravated land elitism that gets formed there compared to a fragmented land ownership? So is there that argument made, or am I reading too much into your preposition? Professor Namesh has also raised his hand. So
I also have a question.
Hi, Rolo. Thank you so much for your talk. This was very insightful and very personally kind of connected to me as well because I'm a local of Sikkim. And what you were talking in your talk kind of brought back so many memories of my own childhood. As a matter of fact, during my school days, we had this lovely park, like a small park that was right next to the River Teest in East Sikkim. And one of the hydroelectric projects that was constructed in the early 2000s led to its entire, the entire area got submerged. And that was common to many other like areas along the river with multiple hydroelectric projects that came in over the years in the state. The question that I wanted to ask you is, while all of these projects that happened all through the years, I mean, I'm sure you would have heard of the massive like land of the disaster that happened in 2023 in Sikkim, where a flash flood destroyed a hydroelectric project, and there was like mass ramifications. A construction of similar projects, multiple projects, also led to the downfall of the major political party in Sikkim that was in power for almost 25 years, leading to a completely new party coming in power. Do you see such kind of trends observed in Manipur as well, especially with respect to the public being angry in terms of how the natural resources of the state are being used for as the construction of these projects such as these ones?
yeah, Dr. Naindra.
Thanks for the presentation. I had two questions. First was somewhat similar to Gayatri's question. So what I mean, I couldn't really get if you are arguing or if there is a case in arguing for a Northeast exceptionalism in one way. Or, I mean, the region has always been a frontier region. It's being ruled, and resources, I mean, though you say it's post 1991, but the entire region, for being a huge border region, has always been looked at from the perspective of resource extraction or militarization. And scholars have argued for its exceptionalism on all of these grounds. The specific question is, I mean, even in terms of accumulation by dispossession and so on, I mean, is there something specific to the Northeast in general, or to, in your case, what you are talking about, the hill areas, basically, where again it relates to the question of land and customary laws being in place? And then when that happens, is there a difference, and what I mean, first is, I mean, is there an exceptionalism are you arguing about? And what is the exact dynamics of it? In the sense of, yeah, I mean, land and customary laws and so on. So that was one. The second is, I mean, I can give a alternate example from the Northeast only. I'm from Assam, by the way. So we had this, and it's still going on, the Lower Subansiri Dam in Assam, which has been a topic of a great controversy and so on. So the difference that I mean, you can comment on it, that I had seen in terms of, say, mobilization around both in terms of when it's being constructed as well as mobilizations around it, whether for or against it. If you compare it and differentiate it from the mainland, so like say the Narmada Dam. So the Narmada Dam or any other dams, I mean, the what gets divided is upstream and versus downstream kind of situation. Even during the Narmada movement, it was like, okay, I mean, the Madhya Pradesh villages are drowning, but farmers of Gujarat will reap the benefits, and so on and so forth. So so there's always this thing of who will get submerged and who will get the gains. And then the opposition also plays out on on those lines. Whereas in the Subansiri case, what was interesting is it had become a kind of a sub-national issue or national issue, I mean, as we call it. I mean, in the sense, it did not remain specific to who particularly gets dispossessed, but it became kind of a, oh, it's a question of our entire ethnicity or our entire nationality. And if this happens, then this dam happens, and then not only the downstream people, but it's a blot on the entire question of Assam, etc., etc. So the how it got framed, and then all the political actors, in fact, from A to Z, where had become anti-dam because they could not offend, so to say, the big nationalist kind of sub-nationalist rhetoric there. So, I mean, the mobilizations then happen around community lines is what I'm trying to get at, rather than the specific of who gets possessed, I mean, dispossessed and so on. I mean, so this was just a comment, and then if a similar comparison can be done with the case that you're referring to, because that's also related to, say, I mean, there's already a difference there between hills and plains, which we have seen in the last phase workout. And so yeah, thank you.
Sakib, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Professor. Thank you for your talk. Basically, what Nayan said, I had something in my mind basically regarding to the disposition and the upstream and downstream kind of thing. The disposition of the people who are living in the upstream who get submerged and then go to the downstream. Then when the water is released and the people are benefited from them. My question is slightly with regards to maybe all the questions are with regards to different contests, different spatial areas. For example, my question is related to Gurez. We have something like this in Gurez, and I want you to comment on it because we have a different thing here. What happened was that when the Kishan Ganga project was like initiated, many farmers, they lost their land as it happens. And what happened because of the compensation, most of them they moved to different areas. But the thing is that they were not compensated according to the laws, according to they were compensated to the market rates that had. And we know the market rates are usually very less than what the actual rate of the land is there. So most of them were compensated for the market rates. And another thing was that those people who asked for land instead of land, who asked for that they should be given land instead of what they are losing, they were given land, and yet they were asked for a different price. The government asked them for a different price, and they had to pay the government more to get that land. So this is another kind of disposition that happened here. So did you find in your study something like this, like they are if they have been given land instead of land, obviously most of your respondents, they did not own land, or as land is owned by some big landlords, but the case here is totally different. So is there some connection between that, or is it a case that has been found? Because I could find it only in Kishan Ganga project. I could not find it anywhere else. So this is a curious case, like something like that. what I could get. And another thing I wanted to add is that the other people who were not particularly displaced by the dam, and when you talk to those people and you tell them that because of this there have been environmental concerns and there can be flash floods and all that, they said, are we people going to be backward, and you people, the city people, will be like, they will be having everything, they'll get everything, and we will be staying backward just for your concerns of environment. We live here, we want development, this is our development, this is what we want. So that was the another thing, that was another comment that I wanted you to come on. Is this something you found in your fieldwork? Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead. That's a lot for you.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for the questions, Professor Namesh, Gayatri, Nayan, and Sakib. So let me start with Professor Namesh, and then I'll come to the question of customary. I don't know. So I have not been to Sikkim, but then since the onset of hydropower plants, have taken off in Sikkim, some of the movements that have come up in Sikkim are quite inspiring, in the sense that there seems to be a sense of collective anger and protest against the construction of the dams. Particularly given that Tista is not only a river but also very sacred, which is deeply embedded in the socio-cultural life of the people. So, and it's from the work that I cited also, it's evident that the construction of the dam is deeply entangled with the state politics. But in the case of Manipur, it did not transform in that way. There was no collective anger and support, at least as far as I know, for the people who are being displaced by Khoga Dam. So there were anger and protest because of the lack of compensation, because of the high-handedness in which things were undertaken, and the use of paramilitary forces to forcibly displace people. But then that anger and that resentment was very, very localized. But I think what we see in Sikkim, and what Nayan has referred to in the context of Assam, how it has taken the level of a sub-nationalism, or taking the character of sub-national issue, did not really happen in the state of Manipur. So because the anger become very, very localized, the kind of it does not receive even any sense of support from people who are living in the towns. So that is something that is quite unfortunate and tragic about Khoga Dam. So coming to the question of customary, now customs and customaries in the Northeast, that is the reason that I know better. They don't come in one basket, in the sense that the question of customs, the question of customary laws is very different. If you look at tribal communities even within Manipur, if you look at the broad two categories of Nagas and Kukis, customs, they're entirely different in terms of their land organization, in terms of the structure of governance. Now, in the context of the Nagas, they have for example, individual land, they have community land, they have clan lands. But the problem with much of the Kuki Zo or the Kuki Zomi group is that there is only single individual who owns the land, that is the chief. And the chief at times can be very autocratic. The chief at times can be very democratic. So it entirely depends on the chiefs, how villages are governed, how lands are distributed. So in the context of Khoga Dam also, what happened is that a village which is pretty much unknown, a village where the idea of the community was very, very strong. So the construction of the dam suddenly made the ownership of land very, very profitable, by which the chiefs began to see the entire land, or the village land, the community land, as his or her own individual property. Now, this transformation of or this is what exists. In other words, there is this commodification and commercialization of land that is happening, and since lands are owned by the chief, so there is no sense of ownership, or there is no possibility of the common people, the village, getting any kind of compensation, whatever is coming from the government side. So what we see in the context of Manipur, particularly among the Kuki Zomi group, is that it's not only about the question of Khoga Dam, but even with the construction of highways that has taken up in the last 5 to 10 years, is that compensation only goes into the hands of the local chiefs. And despite the fact that the construction of any infrastructure projects in the region or in the locals in the hill district of Manipur may or may not have direct consequences on the local people, but then when it comes to compensating for the kind of land acquisition, then it is confined to, or it is cornered by the chiefs most of the time. Now what this means is that what this essentially means is that the villagers have no no right to claim any kind of compensation, but then it directly impacts them because they're losing much of the village land on which they are dependent. So in the last 10 at least 10 to 15 years, we have seen that many of the chiefs, particularly in Chulchanpur district, have sold away village land, by which many people from the villages, from far off villages, are forced to migrate and move out of the village because there is no more communal land, right? So therefore, in that context, customs and customaries, particularly in the context of the Kuki-Zo communities, takes a very, very different character, because there is no real sense of community land, there is no real sense of communal land, because the lands are owned by the chiefs, right? So that is the individual chiefs. So, but the chiefs have the right to give away some lands as a gift. It can give away some part of the land as a gift, but that is the first process towards the privatization of land. And today, what we essentially see is that despite the fact that formal laws or legal formal laws are not applied in the context of many parts of Chulchanpur district, but you see that land transfer is continually happening, and that resulted in the concentration of lands in the hands of few private individuals. So one can go on looking at the way in which how different actors enable this process of land transfer, essentially leading to the concentration of land. So the institutions of the state becomes very, very important, because ideally they should not be allowed to sell the transfer of land, and nor they should be recording them. But then what happened is that there is still this this concentration or this land transfer that has taken place, and it is only by this process that many people, many individuals, particularly who are based in Lamka town, have owned significant amounts of lands in the village areas. So Kogadam is just an example. It may take a very, very different form in the context of the Nagas, essentially because the customs and customary practices there are very different. So likewise in Mizoram, it may take a very, very different form. So one cannot, it's also very difficult for me to make a very generalized kind of argument. But then from what I've seen and what I know, so the kind of land concentration that is taking place is by taking full advantage of the existing customary norms. So I hope I responded. I think some of the observations, I don't intend to make any kind of Northeast exceptionalism. And of course, I agree that the Northeastern region has always been, is always conceived, as a resource frontier, and as a region, where resource extraction, is one of the driving force of accumulation. But still, I feel that in the last 30-40 years, so for example, the state of Assam or Meghalaya, have seen extraction early on, in a sense that you have tea plantation, you have oil refineries. In Meghalaya, you have coal minings, uranium minings. But I think the kind of infrastructural projects that we see was more or less something that is very recent, at least in the context of Manipur or Mizoram. Infrastructure. My interest is to all things in by center versus the or against any infrastructure projects that is coming. Secondly, not to entirely see these communities, particularly in the context of my study, tribal communities, as victims of development. Many a times, through my case, what I have seen is that there are a lot within the tribal communities themselves who have who have seek benefits, who aim to accumulate wealth out of this. And in the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen, the huge pumping of money, and this pumping of money has largely come, from the construction of hydropower projects, the expansion of, road networks in the region where those who have owned lands, particularly the chiefs, have significantly benefited from, or make profit out of land compensation. So I think, and to Sakib, I think, I mean, I really don't know, because you are coming from a different context, and I'm sorry that because I have not really read about what you say. But what I can say is that, the issue of compensation, is still very much an unresolved issue. And my problem, in the context of Manipur, because like I said, I don't really know the context, where you are speaking from. But what I know from my context is that, the nature of the land ownership, the property relations, have a lot to do with, who actually get profit, from the land compensation. Now, much of the local elites in Jorchanpur never spoke out or never speak against, land alienation, or never speak up against, the construction of the dam, because they see that, they see that, they can profit from land compensation deals. They see that, they will be in a position to, to acquire, some form of wealth, in different forms. Now, the construction of Khogha Dam is also very much, controversial, in the sense that, it started off in the 1980s and it was inaugurated in 2010. But the dam is, a failed dam, in the sense that, it does not generate any electricity, it does not irrigate any fields. Now, there is no sense of accountability. But the issue remains that, since there is this network of actors, including the businessmen, including the local politicians, including the chiefs, including even insurgents, who are involved, in acquiring contracts, from out of the construction of the dam. So by which, sometimes, it's also very difficult and dangerous even to talk about it. So therefore, I have avoided, that very complex terrain, because it is something, where things get, very murky in terms of the kind of, compensation deals. And there are also a lot of accusations in terms of, how several actors, have sought to, profit, from the compensation in particular, also in terms of, getting contracts. So I think, what happened essentially in the context of Khogha Dam is that, it was entangled with, local politics. It was also, in some sense, very murky in the kinds of deals that the state government entered with the, insurgent groups. So there is an area that I did not talk about. But then, there was a lot of involvement of, local insurgent groups as well in the construction of the dams. So I think I will stop here. I hope I responded to some of the questions.
Sure. If there is any additional comments from anyone, we can take that. And then we can.
I had a clarification to ask from what you just said. So, I mean, you have this huge entire literature anyway of transition from feudalism to capitalism. But in the context of the specific case there, like the hills, and the customary laws that you are describing for the Pugizo people, where, I mean, the chief and the people, and that ownership is not similar to landlord and serfs kind of model at all. I mean, it's a different kind of model. But then, are you saying then, I mean, in such spaces also, capital penetration is when, I mean, something like this happens, capital penetration is much facilitated by the specific kind of customary laws that you have. I mean, then it becomes more easier. Was that in your answer? I mean, I didn't get it. I just wanted a clarification.
Yeah, and I
mean, usually we put, yeah. I mean, usually we pitch, okay, customary laws, meaning some control of the community, etc., and so on. But here, you seem to be saying something, so I just wanted to clarify.
So in the context of the Kuki, Zomi, and other groups that we have in Manipur, I don't think there is a sense of the community when it comes to owning the land, but in the past, the notion of what the chief should do, the notion of property was very different, in the sense that local communities perceive or understand the chief as guardians of the village, right? But over a period of time, what we see is that the institution of the chief is transformed into a different institutions, and that transformation also is coupled with the kind of democratization that we see on one hand, where in the name of participatory development, in the name of bottom-up approach of development, we are enforcing only existing power structures, right? And the chiefs again become every development transformation has to be undertaken through the institution of the chief in the name of participatory development. It's not, that is one side of the story. Now the other side of the story is that given that there is a sudden push for infrastructural projects in the Northeast, what we see is that the chiefs began to see the land as the most valued, right? By which they are no longer they no longer wish to give share anything, right? So because the land is being transformed as a private property, which was not so the case in the past. In the past, the community have a sense that this land belongs to us, and by virtue of being a village or a resident in the village, they also have some sense of ownership. But with the coming of this infrastructural process that we see, particularly in Manipur and other parts, what we essentially see is that land is becoming so valued that suddenly the chief is claiming himself or herself to be the sole owner of the land. So, but I don't think that it is fruitful for me to engage with the transition of feudalism to capitalism at all, because because that is an entirely different thing, and that is too big for me a debate to handle it here. And I don't really know whether that kind of argument can be situated in the context that I'm coming from. But what I'm more interested is that to really see the differential experience of the construction of the dams and what it means for different people in the community.
Thank you so much. Puya, there is one question in the chat box. Do you caste plays a role in this relation to elites?
Caste.
Caste, yeah. It's a question on caste relation.
No, since these are primarily tribal tribes or tribal communities, so there is no sense of caste relations doesn't play have no influence in terms of the social structure or the economic organization of the society. So the relationship, the social relationship here is very, very different.
Saqib, you had your hand.
No, I was basically asking that there's a question, so that's all.
Okay. Thank you so much, Puya, and for all those who are attending. Our colleague Saqib has put the link to the MSc Development Practice Program in the chat box, and to request you to circulate it in your circles so that it's a one-year program. It's classes are happening 3 times a day, 3 times a week in Delhi. So it is useful for people who are working as well. So it's a gentle request to spread the word about it. And coming back to this, Puya, when we began, I told you your paper is going to evoke some conversations. And now I think I got a taste of it, what I was referring to. And thank you so much.
Yes.
Ultimately, what scholarship is about is evoking these conversations and having these transactions of thoughts and all that. And thank you so much. This was so interesting. The discussions, I learned a lot
Thank you,
also.
Gayatri.
And thank you so much for your time and for agreeing to be part of this, and also agreeing to record this despite it being a work in progress and all that. And thank you all to all the participants for staying back. Yeah, we are almost ending on time. And thank you so much, and wish you all a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. And I hope we will continue to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sometime we would love to have it on our campus too. Bye.